Hello team, welcome to my session, and today we have some special coffees, not for any exam prep, but it is more like a interview preparation section. In this session, I'm going to discuss some interview questions which is asked by the company to the consultant, manager or CISO. And this series is not about a definition. This series all about the question which test your thought process, test your analytical skills, test your responses, how you giving to the company, and some kind of a case study. My name is Prab Nair, and for more information, you can refer my LinkedIn profile. Thank you. So let's start with the first interview question. Now, interview question you're talking about is you joined as a security consultant in the organization. Your organization planned to use public cloud computing for its applications and other business services. What is the primary concern you would like to address with this initiatives? Now, this is normally a question asked in those companies which is transitioning to the cloud side, or they're planning to do migration to the cloud. Okay, so in this question, you know, they're talking about what will be your concerns, or they already gave you a problem. Okay, because in most of the cases, in the case of consulting profile, okay, most of the cases you need to handle the problems and you need to come up with the solution. Here the problem is they're planning to use public cloud computing. That is the one thing we have. And the second most important thing they're talking about, they're planning to migrate the applications also. Okay, so what is the concern? So being CISO, being consultant, you will have to collaborate with the key stakeholders in establishing the risk management program for the organizations. You need to make sure the solution you're talking about, it should be mapped with the business objective. So in this case, the first thing you need to explain about the risk associated with the use of public cloud computing. Definitely public cloud computing provide a cost effective solution, but along with that it offers several risks. Okay, first of all, we don't have any visibility, okay, about the infrastructure. So we have to review the entire provider. We need to request the audit reports like SOC 2 report. We will request for the ISO report. We request for the assessment reports, which gives a kind of a visibility about their governance. So this is how you can address these concerns. You can request their last year audit reports after the signing of NDA. Definitely when you going for any kind of a services, you need to sign the NDA, you need to sign the some special agreements, because these documents are basically reveal their architecture information. So as a consultant, you can request their SLAs, you can request their contract information, you can ask about the data localization, you can ask about the BCP DR services, because shifting to the cloud is more about availability. You need to also understand about their governance report. You can request their policy procedures, how they basically manage the governance. So this is how you can able to handle this particular case study. Okay, because question was talking about the primary concern. So this is the first question we have. So let's move to the next coffee shot. Suppose we have appointed you as a freelance security consultant to conduct a thorough analysis of all aspects of corporate security. We are especially concerned about unauthorized access to its physical office following the network compromises. Which technique will be performed to assess the likely risk? So in this question, they're giving you the scenario where if we hiring a consultant and we are expecting them to assess the corporate security, and we also need to understand from that corporate security, is it possible to compromise the network? Okay, now the reason of asking such question is they just want to test your thought process. Suppose tomorrow when you joining as a consultant and when you're planning to hire any penetration tester or you're planning to hire any security assessor, so how you handle such situation? So in this technique, if you want to assess the risk, the first thing is that as a consultant, I will sign the NDA. I will request for scoping of the document. I will request for the scoping of the assessment. Okay. And we also need to understand about what kind of a testing they want to perform, as it is clearly mentioned that they're looking for a corporate security and along with that further network compromise. So they have a two areas. So they want to test the lateral movement and all that. Example, this is the organization network we have, where we have a DMZ and then we have a internal network. So they want to test the corporate security. They want to test the internal network, from where I want to hack one of the server of DMZ, and from there I want to hack into the internal network. So for this, I have a multiple techniques. First, I will try to perform social engineering. So this is how you can able to present, like I will first sign the NDA, get the scoping done and everything, because without the permission doing that, it is a hacking. Definitely you will not get it signed from the employee against which you're doing a social engineering. You need to sign the NDA with the suppose if I'm a consultant and I'm signing the NDA, I'm signing the NDA with the employee who initiated this VAPT from external sites. Example, I am a consultant, I'm basically doing a project for the IBM. So there will be vendor who, there will be their team will basically sign the NDAs and all that. So this kind of an approval we have. So first thing what I'm going to perform is social engineering. I will gather information about the company. I will gather information about the employees, and I will try to connect them on the LinkedIn. And from there, I will try to collect the email IDs, and then I will try to send them phishing emails. And through the phishing email, I will try to compromise their system, and then that system I will use to attack the further system. So this is how I can able to assess the corporate security. I can assess the social engineering parameters. I'm also getting an understanding about how secure is the infrastructure from internal to external. So this is how I will going to handle this question. So let's move to the next interview question. Aspirants Finance LLP employ you as a freelance security consultant. After joining a firm, it has come to your notice that your company is subject to new laws for securing the information handled through a certain kind of a transaction. How will you deal with such activity? So here the scenario is, they ask you the scenario that, okay, suppose we make you join the company and now we are subject to new laws and all that. And as per that law, we need to secure the information. So if you ask me as a consultant, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assess the new regulation requirement against the current control. If the organization complies with the existing control, then we perform the other works related to the regulation, which is not a priority. Any gap we identify and need for new control, we submit the business case through a change management and configuration management process we implement. And make sure we also have a backup plan, because if any control failed, with the backup plan, we can able to restore the previous one. And after implementing a control to meet the new regulatory requirement, we will do the detailed assessment to make sure they compliance with the new regulation. One example I can take, suppose I joined in 2016-17 when the GDPR was amended in most of the countries, because they're supporting the EU. Now, what is the first thing? Definitely, I'm not going to reassess the entire organization for GDPR. First of all, I will try to understand what is the current requirement of GDPR. Then I will see my current controls. I will assess the gap between what we need and what is there. Based on that, I will introduce the new controls. Come on, I don't have authority to implement the control, so I will submit the business case to the management about the justification of implementing those controls. And once I get a approval on those controls, I will implement those controls through a change management and configuration management process. And then I will assess the effectiveness of the control to make sure it will be driven by the GDPR requirement. So this is how I will handle such question. Thank you. Another interesting question which normally people or company ask from the CISO or security consultant, like this is the scenario we have. A risk assessment for a large planned acquisition and new procedure for organization have been completed. It means they have planning to complete the assessment for the acquisition of a new procedure for an organization. So they already complete that. But there is a dispute between you, the information security manager. Suppose you join as an information security manager, and the business department manager who will be in charge of the process in terms of outcome and the allocated risk. So how will you handle the situation? The question talking about the company has acquired the new organization, and part of an acquisition, the activity has been split between information security manager and business manager. Definitely business manager has more benefit of an acquisition, because by acquiring the another organization, They're getting more and more new business, and they get a value. But for information security manager, it's always a risk. But the question is, who will basically take care of the risk? So better in this situation, how to answer this kind of a question. So make sure your answer should be diplomatic. Okay, your answer should be diplomatic. It should not hurt the business also, it should not hurt the management also, and make sure it should not create any trouble. See, whenever we go for an acquisition, okay, one thing is that when information security manager get appointed for this process, he will first collect the risk report, threat report, vulnerability report, certification report of the organization that we are planning to acquire. Because when you go for an acquisition, we have to recertify the entire organization. You have to revalidate the things. When you go for an acquisition, new risk, new threat, new vulnerabilities are basically emerged, because you have a complete visibility about your organization, but you have no visibility about the organization you're planning to acquire, or it is acquired. So that is why, dispute comes. Who will take the risk? So we assess all those activities to make sure, everything has been done as per the plan manner and as per the limited impact, because 100% risk cannot be eliminated. So in this condition, what we can do is, because risk management choice may sometimes have a substantial financial effect, because risk come with any kind of financial impact. So we need some kind of a major adjustment. First of all, introduce a RACI chart: responsible, accountable, consultant, informed for their processes. And executive management must be supportive of this process thoroughly, make them understand and talk about the outcome from this particular risk. And by this way, you can have a meeting with the business, you can have a meeting with the senior management and explain about how this risk will impact the business and how this risk will basically impact the information security. If it comes to information security, this part of a risk, we are accountable. If this particular risk associated with the business comes to this, and then this is the responsibility of business manager. So this is how you can able to handle this outcome, by involving the senior management and thoroughly documented who will responsible for what. So I will give this kind of an answer to handle this particular issue. Next next interview question. Healthcare company security team recently discovered that network has been compromised, and some hackers had obtained that patient data. As a hospital chief information security officer, you provide this evidence to the senior management team, report that vulnerability that caused the breach has already been remedied, and explain the team is still following the proper incident response strategy. The executive team is worried about the brand damage and would appreciate your advice. So they're asking my advice on communicating the event to the impacted patient. How will you communicate the same? See, in this scenario, the data was compromised, breach has been done, we rectify, but here informing about the breach to the customer is a concern for the senior management. Here you need to handle this particular case in a very in a diplomatic manner. In this condition, how to answer is, you will answer this. First thing is that you need to understand which data is compromised and the affected party. For that, you need to schedule the meeting with the business heads. You need to schedule a meeting with the concerned parties who handling those business, understand the entire process. Okay. Then review the legal and regulatory requirement. We need to check, do we have any mandate to notify the affected party? Example, in GDPR, within 72 hours, you need to report the breach to the affected party. So that we need to do. Then involve the business team, PR team, and craft the message in such a manner that it should not create a much impact. Okay. And explain them about the outcome of this, and explain them about what is basically the impact. And this is how you can able to communicate the things to the party. So next coffee shot or next interview question. You as a CISO observe an employee utilizing a username and password and scribbled on the writing pad to log into a particular service while attending a meeting with the finance department. It means you notice that, okay, person is basically noting down the passwords because he's going to use a password to access things, and he's from finance department, which is a very critical department. Okay. With the curious, you ask why password has been written down. The answer is that there are too many passwords to remember, because when you're trying to access multiple applications for every system, we need to remember the username password. And one more risk is that if you have too many passwords, there is a possibility of session hijacking and information disclosure. So too many passwords to remember for all of the numerous services that finance department needed to utilize. Furthermore, each password has a various complexity criteria and expiry time. What is the best solution you will recommend? First, here I will first understand. So my response will be, I will first understand what is the business they have, what is the criticality, sensitivity of a data they have. Is the access driven from within the organization, or is access is basically driven from external to the organization? So that is the one thing we basically try to initiate. Along with that, we also see what is the impact. And based on that, I will recommend to implement the SSO solutions. If it's within a one domain, then SSO solution. If it's going to be across multi-domain, and then I will recommend the federation identity. So I will submit the business case to the management, pros and cons, and value about SSO, because by this way, they can basically avoid creating a multiple password for different applications. So they can use one single password to access the multiple things. So SSO is the best solution to handle these concerns. It's a very interesting question. You joined an information security consultant in the organization. What should be a first step before undertaking a formal risk assessment of an organization information resources? It means the question talking about the question they ask me that, okay, what you will do as a first step before doing a risk assessment. So my response will be, first, I will first understand the business requirement. I will obtain the inventory of assets. I will try to contact the business owner and collect the end-to-end understanding of business, how it works. Then I try to identify the business values. The best person to tell me is the asset owner, data owner, or business owner. Then I will request the recent VAPT reports that give me the visibility about how vulnerable it is. We also ask for the last risk assessment report, which give me visibility about what is the risk we have. And then based on that, I will conduct the risk assessment, which is mostly happen called qualitative risk assessment. And based on that, I will give my recommendation. And recommendation include about treatment of the risk, like accept, avoid, and transfer. So this is basically the activity I does before we undertake a formal risk assessment. Let's move to the next question. Why do you need a security policy? Most of the companies basically ask this question, especially from CISO. They want to test your thought process, okay, your perspective about the senior management. By asking this question, they want to test your governance knowledge also, because policy is a foundation for governance. So that's why this is how they try to ask, why do you need a security policy? So who is responsible for securing the information? Perhaps the IT team? Not exactly. Management information system staff? Wrong. Ultimately, it is not only individual employee or department that are responsible for security of the confidential information, but also the organization itself. It is therefore accountabilities of the top management, who are basically charged with protecting the institution best interest and ensure that appropriate and effective security policies develop and put into practice throughout the organization. That's why senior management approve the policy, and we as an information security officer create the policy. So whenever we basically creating a policy, the reason of creating a policy is to convey the organization why we need these initiatives. Same like you cannot enforce any order without law. Same like policy is a constitution, policy is a law of a country, of the organization. And if you want to bring any kind of a uniformity of security activities, we need a policy. So after understanding the business requirement, so now I'm explaining about the step-by-step process. So after understanding all the business requirement, regulations, and current culture, you draft the policy. You will involve the business owners, understand the requirement. You cannot create by their own thought process. You need to involve the business holders. You need to involve all the affected parties, take their input, and create the policy. Then you submit the policy to the management, and management will basically approve the policy. One thing you need to remember is security policy should be clear. It should be comprehensive. It should be well defined. Okay, it should be well defined plan. It should have a rules. It should have a practice that regulates the access to the organization system. Your policy should meet the regulatory requirement, compliance requirement, your business requirement. And the good policy protect the information and system and individual employees and organization as a whole. So it is also serve as a prominent statement to the outside world about the organization commitment to security. That is why we need a policy in the organization. Okay, so next question which people might ask after the follow-up of the first question is how to develop security policy. See, security policy must be based on the result of a risk assessment. Okay, so finding from a risk assessment provide the policymaker with the accurate picture of the security need specific to their organization. So this is how you can start. So when you're talking about any information, so information is very imperative. Okay, information is imperative because proper policy development require a decision maker to identify sensitive information and critical systems, right? So when we're creating a policy, we understand the legal requirement, we understand the regulatory requirement, we identify the current sensitive data. Okay, we need to understand the stakeholders. So all these factors we need to consider. So first step here is understand all the requirement. Okay, review the risk assessment results and try to identify what kind of a risk we have. So according to that, we develop the policy. Now in the policy, we incorporate the local, state, federal law as well as ethical standards. We basically incorporate the security goals and objective. We set the course of accomplishing those goals and objectives. We ensure the necessary mechanism for accomplishing the goals and objective are in place. Policy should be clear and easy to understand, which also reflect the management intent. Okay, then the next thing is basically based on the policy, we embodied the background detail about the policy, because to make easy for other to understand, we need a background. Okay, so we need to explain why we need this policy, and we explain the background of the policy. And the policy should become with the standard which explain about the metrics by which we measure the effectiveness of the policy. It must have a baseline, it must have a guideline. Okay, without that, policy is like orphan. So this is the step-by-step process by which we develop the security policy. So first, do the risk assessment, review the risk assessment results, identify legal regulatory requirement, map with those requirements, and amend that in the policy. In the policy, we clearly talk about background, intent, incorporate all the laws, regulations and everything, goals and objectives. And then based on that, we basically create a standard procedure and guideline. And we also need to mention the version history, because this is how you can able to track the integrity of the policy. So this is how you can basically answer this question. Let's move to the next interview question. Okay, when emergency security patch is received by electronic mail, what will be your next action plan you recommend security team? So it is very important. First, we need to validate the patch authenticity. So as a consultant, I will recommend the team download the patch, check the code signature, and by this way you verify the authenticity of a patch. So by this way we get an assurance that okay, this patch is came from a right server. Then in an isolated environment, which is copy of a production environment, we basically test, and if it worked properly through the change management and release management and patch management, we introduce the patch in the phases. So this is how we will basically handle the emergency change. My next question, if they ask me, what will be the good KPI you set for measuring the effectiveness of information security program? KPI stands for key performance indicator. So a good KPI is the one which map with the business objective. So always senior management want the KPI should be created in such a manner that it should reflect the business objective. Example, if we implementing information security program, what they're looking forward for it. By this program, how many incident we have closed, how many incident we have reduced, how many incident we able to detect. So your KPI, a good KPI is the one which map with the business objective, and their output should be easy to understand. So this is how you can able to frame the question or frame the answer. If you find this video useful, do share in your network, and do subscribe to my YouTube channel. And this is all from my side, team. And if you're looking for more videos like that, do share your feedback in the comment sections. What are the other section I can cover in the interview prep? Thank you.